they go into the like, oh, it's just lazy people that don't want to work. Why should I have to work and, you know, give away my labor, or they're stealing my labor? And it's like, I just started thinking about like within regards to like propaganda and everything. I was like, why is it that people automatically assume that like you're just lazy? It's because most people I know work, you know, especially poor people. You know, they got they got jobs, you know, whether it's fast food jobs or whatever. It's like they're working, right? Sometimes 2 or 3 jobs. I mean, I know a lot of people that have a job and then do Uber after. I mean, you were doing that for a while, you know, and it's like this idea that because we think that, you know, food should be provided for us, or that somehow it's like, I don't know, that means you're just lazy. And I don't. So anyways, my point being was that I asked ChatGPT like a question. I typed like a paragraph out like, hey, you know, I keep seeing this sentiment online that blah, 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 blah. And, you know, like I started asking questions like how many people are actually on welfare in regards to the population. And anyways, the first thing was, that's a very interesting question, and you're right to critique that or be thinking about it. Was just very like flattering and saying, oh wow, you're such a genius for like, you know, thinking that way. But it did basically, you know, it also told me that, yeah, it essentially is just propaganda that's been fed to us, that somehow the undeserving poor. There was 2 books by 2 authors that escaped me, but yeah. But yeah, 2 different, but it was about like this idea of the undeserving poor, you know, that like elderly and children, you know, or disabled people maybe deserve it, but like a single mother doesn't because she made bad choices. It's almost like they treat being poor as some kind of moral failing or something.
Well, yeah, that's certainly part of the what do you call it? The zeitgeist, maybe, that if you're poor, yeah, you're it's your fault, and yeah, it is a moral failing. It's presented that way, that, you know, you don't have the right set of values, apparently, you know, if you're poor. You don't save. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen what you were looking at, so I don't.
The only reason why I can't pull it up is because I have 2 Gmail accounts. One is my last name, first name, and the other one is first name, last name. I don't know how this ended up working out, but somehow the one that's just my first name, last name, I just got like 2 years ago. I feel like I tried when that's why I did last name, first name, because I didn't want to put numbers or nothing. I wanted it to just be my name.
Right.
At Gmail. And anyways, the first name, last name has become my work Gmail. Like I use that at work to save my work passwords and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. So the particular conversation you were at work on your work computer.
Yeah.
So you don't have access to it.
Yeah. I mean, I if I tried to remember my password and all that stuff, but I didn't really.
Oh, okay. So it's the saved password on the work computer, so you don't even try to remember it anymore.
Yeah. It's just, and I don't have it hooked up to my iPad. So,
well, at any rate,
but yeah,
you were talking about how, or at least I think that what you were trying to link it to is our discussion that we had on propaganda, right, and how that perception, you were talking about like this, the poor as a failing, right?
Yeah.
That there's this story that gets pumped out into the world that when the working poor are looking for a little bit of help, it's like, well, we don't have to help you because it's your fault.
Right.
And I
also the lazy aspect. It's like poor people are just automatically painted as lazy too. Or it seems like it, but yeah. Which I suppose could be a moral failing.
Well, if you actually are lazy,
yeah,
then yeah, that would be. I would consider that to be something that you would need to work on, because you know what you should do, you just refuse to do it, which is different from the experience that you were talking about, though. You were talking about the people that are, working their retail job and then Grubhubbing or DoorDashing, and maybe trying something else, picking up a land, like cutting grass on the weekends or whatever.
Right.
That those people who are in fact working multiple jobs at this minimum wage or barely above, trying to keep up with the whatever you call it, the constant rise in the cost of living, versus the people that won't work. Right? They're like, oh, I'm not going to take a retail job. No, that's below me. Right? Kind of thing.
Right.
And sometimes in the national conversation, what we end up hearing is more of the people that are gaming the system. You don't hear about the people like we're talking about, the people that are working two jobs and Grubhubbing or DoorDashing or Uber or whatever. What you hear about are we just found, John Doe who was, collecting $1,800 a month, on all these government handouts while he's just laying around playing video games all day. Yeah. And that'll be all over the news. Oh, this is why we have to do something. This is why we have to cut those programs because of these people. Except that those kind of people are 0.02% of the entire population of people that get aid.
Exactly. And yeah.
And I'm pulling a number out of my ass. It could be higher than that.
Yeah, but it's the point is just like most people work. It's more that the system is just not set up to it essentially, like I think one of the things one of the authors said in one of those two books that I'm not remembering, but anyways, it was something along the lines of basically like capitalism, it kind of like needs poor people in order to operate. It's like you almost need to have people at the bottom that are not really surviving.
You just reminded me of something. It's a George Carlin routine. And I'm going to screw it up, but it's like, the rich, the middle class, and the poor people. You have to have poor people in order to keep the middle class in line. I guess it was basically George Carlin's point. It was like the poor people are there to let the middle class know that if you don't play along, that's where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
And I know I screwed it up, and he does it a lot better.
I'm sure. Yeah.
There's a reason I'm not on stage and he was.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of like, I guess I saw that, and it's funny because a lot of the people that are parroting these points they're probably one step away from poor themselves. They're one lost job away from being poor, or, maybe not that close, but, nobody, unless you're like wealthy, nobody's really that far away from being poor, But it kind of had me thinking about, because, last week we kind of teased, actually, let's just, I guess, get into it. Welcome to Occasionally Philosophical, father and son podcast, where we talk about philosophy occasionally and
sometimes
and other stuff.
So I'm Doug,
and I'm Mark.
And where were you going with that?
I was just gonna say, because I guess ultimately it is the reason why people believe, that poor people, for example, are lazy, undeserving. They just want a free ride. I think it had me thinking about that through the lens of propaganda, and how did you convince somebody who's one paycheck away from being poor that the people, that they're lazy, the people right below them are lazy, or.
Well, I saw something the other day. There's an economist, Robert Reich, I think. Yeah, Reich, R-E-I-C-H.
That sounds familiar. I've seen that.
Yeah, he's been around for a while, and he's definitely on the progressive side of the political line. But he had a video. I didn't watch it, but the what do they call that? The thumbnail was that 73% of the working population right now is basically living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, it actually.
And well, when you think about that, like if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you literally are like that one, like a layoff or whatever from, oh God, it's the end of the road or whatever. Not necessarily the end of the road, but it's panic time.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with laziness. Like when you get laid off, you remember me, like, coming home and having to look at you and saying, yeah, son, I lost my job today.
Yeah.
And having to face that thing. And that's, I guess it would be more, what do you do after you get laid off? Right. Most of us, the first thing we do is we head down to the unemployment office. We file for unemployment. We start collecting that. And then, you go out and you try to find another job. Right. Now, I don't know how the laziness thing, because it's like the commentariat on the mass media, is echoing that line, right? Well, that the people are lazy. That's why they're.
Well, for example, there's like the stereotype or the painting the picture of the 35-year-old, 40-year-old man who's living in his mom's basement just playing video games all day. Or on the flip side, there's the welfare queen, which Ronald Reagan,
that was all
championed. That somehow there's just these, women are just gaming the system. They're just living high off the hog. And the funny thing is when you look at like the actual amounts that they get, and I mean, I've known people that were on welfare, and it's like they're getting like $500 a month cash, and I don't know, $300 in food stamps. It's like they're getting free stuff, but like they're not living high on the hog. They're just like, because
the counter argument would be, well, what are you doing for that $800 a month, right? And
it's a lot of jumping through hoops,
Well, yeah, and I mean, that
to prove that you're worthy.
Well, yeah, to prove that I'm destitute enough to qualify for this $800 a month. I remember when you were little. I mean, like little, like 3 or 4, and I got laid off. and I was, getting my unemployment, which wasn't enough, to cover the rent and everything, or barely enough to cover the rent. But as far as like food and other stuff, I was struggling, and I went to apply for some government assistance, and I was told that I had made too much money the prior year.
Right. Yeah.
And I looked at them and I went, that was last year. That's not now. That money got spent, that I lived on that money. I'm not making that kind of money now. And it was like, well, you made too much money last year. If you can stay poor all year long,
then we'll give you money
and then come back next year. And I'm like, yeah, but
I might not be alive by then.
I have a kid,
Right,
we have to survive. So yeah, I was angry and I left, and I ended up landing another job, and here we are.
Well, that actually reminds me of another tied into you being laid off. You had lost your job like my senior year of high school or whatever, right around during. And when I was applying for financial aid, they were going based off the year before. And so I didn't qualify for because you had made so much money and it was just me and you, not that not that we were rich, but we were comfortable.
It was a good, those were a couple of good years. Those were a couple of good years.
Yeah, so there's that. There was that. That too. I got denied for financial aid because
I made too much money
the year before. Right. Even though you weren't making that money, and but hey.
Well, that's part of but again, to be fair, the reason that is that you should be saving, right? So there should be something in the bank. Now that we can't because of the high cost of living and all that kind of stuff, that's the personal responsibility. It's like one of the lessons that your grandmother tried to teach me, like when I was growing up, was like, well, if you went and you shoveled a driveway, and somebody gave you $2, well, then you should put 10% of that in the bank.
Right.
20 cents in the bank, and it didn't make much sense to me. But then many, 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 many years later, I read that book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And basically that's what it says. It's every time you get any kind of money, you take a part of it and set it aside. And so to the argument, like if you were going to be on the more conservative side, personal responsibility, that might be the argument would be no matter what. But very often, I know I did it. Rather than take that little bit of money and set it off in savings, even though like it wasn't growing enough, I would use that money to treat us to something. We'll go get ice cream, or we'll go out for pizza, or I'll take you out to McDonald's or whatever.
And that's actually like another, I guess, debate that I see is like there's the joke of the millennials and their Starbucks and avocado toast.
Right.
Or their Netflix subscriptions. And it's like sometimes some of these people that are like super financially conservative, I'll say, where it's like, oh, well, you don't need that, so you shouldn't be spending money on that. Why do you need a new car? Why can't you just go buy some beater off of Craigslist, right? Or whatever the argument is. But the point I wanted to make was that at what point am I supposed to enjoy life? I think that there's some balance that just because I'm poor, I don't think means that I can't, like you said, sometimes that extra money you would use to treat us. Well, let's just say it was take me to the movies and we went to go see whatever, Jurassic Park or something, when maybe, yeah, could you have saved that money? Yeah, but it's also like at what point am I supposed to enjoy my life if I'm poor?
Well, at what even for when the Robert Reich thing, that 73% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. Now when you take 73% of people, those are some people that are living in those nice neighborhoods, right? You know, like Middletown where I live.
You you said something to me that when we first moved to Rockland, you probably don't remember, but I remember I was delivering pizzas for Papa John's, and I remember going to this house, and it was a huge house. We were living in an apartment, you know, like we pretty much have forever. I went to this house, and the woman wrote me a check. I mean, this is how long ago this was, back when you could write a check to the pizza delivery driver. But point being is that she wrote the check for the exact amount of the pizza. And I'm looking at this house, and this house is like, well, you know, new construction, you know, probably nothing like crazy, but, you know, 2,200 square foot, new construction, you know, that plain kind of clay colored or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, that California color.
That California, you know, kind of. But anyways, and I remember being so upset because it's like I'm working for, you know, I was getting, I think, like $6 an hour from Papa John's at the time, and whatever tips I could make, I got. And I'm like, this person got this, they couldn't even give me $1 or $2.
Yeah.
You know, and anyways, point being was, after that, I think I told you that experience, and then you said to me that essentially, just because they have a big house and a big car, they're probably still living paycheck to paycheck. They're just living paycheck to paycheck on a higher level than you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and I never kind of forgot that, like, because it's like, yeah, and that Robert Reich kind of, you know, proves that in a way. You know, it's like
yeah, you can have your, you know, 5,000 square foot, you know, $1.2 million, you know, home there in Middletown or Homedale or whatever, and be making, you know, $200,000 a year, but your expenses, you know, that mortgage payment, you know, the landscape. I had that one fair. I picked them up in Homedale in one of them, you know, huge houses. And apparently, if I remember correctly, his company developed the ink or the dye for the McDonald's French fry cup, that red dye. That's his company.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so apparently that's the contract. They make the dye that McDonald's uses to print their things. So he's doing all right. And he's got 2 factories, one in New Jersey and the other one down in North Carolina. And I think he was flying to North Carolina to check on that other factory. But I remember him telling, like I asked him about how big his house was, and I forget, it was like 8,000 square feet or whatever, something like that. And apparently by this particular point, the family had all grown up and gone out, and, like the fact that it was, he thought it was just too big. And I won't say the number, but the amount of like maintenance just every month that he had to spend just to keep the exterior and all that, like, holy cow, so yeah, you can be making a lot of money, but when you start adding up all of those expenses, it's the same thing. Yeah. I just sat down. I just brought my paycheck home this week. It was $15,000, but I just wrote $13,000 of bills. Right. So, yeah, I've got $2,000 left, but kids in college, private school, gymnastic lessons, whatever, yeah, it's different, but you're still in that same, if I lose my job, the whole house of cards comes crumbling down. And then you talk about the mental health crisis, right? And why are people so stressed out? I wonder.
Well, yeah, because you have to keep maintaining that lifestyle, you have to keep working, and I see it sometimes, like in my job, it's like the people that make the most money are always like they seem to have the least amount of time. They're like, I can only pick up the car on Tuesday between 3 and 4 p.m., or something like that. Whereas like people that, are not in that $1 million range or whatever, or close to that $1 million a year range, tend to be like, oh, whenever you're ready, I can, And part of, I imagine, is because of that lifestyle they're trying to upkeep. It's like, yeah, what was it? I think it was Hulk Hogan way back in the days was getting divorced. So some of his financial stuff started coming out, and I not that I super cared about it or anything, but one of the things that stood out to me was that his like monthly bills were like $60,000. And at the time I was, my job, I think I was making like $40,000 a year. And I'm just like looking at this, like this dude spends $60,000 every month for upkeep for, his electric bill and his mortgage and his shopping habits and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, when you get up to that level, I mean, it's like anything else. One of the things that I encountered a long time ago was that the person, or whether it was in a book or a magazine article or whatever, but it was expenses rise to meet income. Right. And I thought, at first I was like, nah, because if I was only making, this much money, and I thought if I got an extra, 10 grand a year, that would be money that would go in the bank. And as I made, as my career progressed and I made more money, yeah, your expenses, you get a nicer place, instead of, the 1-bedroom apartment, you get the 2-bedroom, or, instead of renting the apartment that has the laundry room, you spend the extra $100 a month to rent the apartment with the washer dryer hookup, and it little things like that, because when you make a little bit more money, you've been sacrificing. Like when do you get to go out and have fun?
Right. Well, a perfect recent example was like 3 days ago. I had a customer that recently got basically a promotion. I won't get into the details, but basically he got a promotion at work where he's going to be making more money now. Now, he currently drives like, I think it was a 2011 Toyota Corolla. Nothing wrong with it. The mileage wasn't even super high. It was under 100,000. So he owns it outright. There's nothing wrong with the car. But now that he has this promotion and he's going to be making more money, he wants to treat himself to buy something new. And this is not the first time. I mean, this is over my 12 years career. Like I've seen it, dozens, if not 100 times or more, of expenses rising expenses rising to meet your income. Oh, I got a raise, so there's nothing wrong with my car,
but it's old.
But it's old, and I just want something new. Exactly.
You get into, well, why do I need a new car?
Yeah, which is funny because he actually talks about cars specifically in the book, where he says like most men will convince themselves that the reason why they bought this car is because they did all this and they need locomotion. I mean, he says it like, but they need to get from point A to point B is how I would say it in a more modern parlance. Right. I need it for transportation. I wouldn't say locomotion, but anyways, it's like, so you convince yourself that that's why you bought it, and you picked this specific car because you looked at the numbers and the horsepower and the blah, 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 and you decided that this car was the best bang for your buck. Mm-hmm. It's not. You fell for the propaganda. This brand, Audi and Mercedes-Benz, they sell this premium luxury brand. Toyota sells reliability, and or where whatever, Mazda sells more of like an image, like the driving experience,
zoom, zoom,
zoom, zoom, it's like
a Subaru, your safety,
it's like they all kind of pick something that they identify with. And believe me, like, none of the cars is that much better, or maybe I shouldn't say that much better, but like most people are not making a decision that's solely based on logic and reasoning,
No. Well, the interesting thing, I mean, since we talked about it, one of the things that I noted, I mean, I've like underlined all kinds of stuff here, but in the interesting thing about this is that, the book was written almost 100 years ago, right?
Right.
And it basically describes the world that we live in, the media environment that we live in. I mean, say what you will about Bernays, right? But as far as public relations goes, he was the man. I mean, he was very, very good at it and extremely successful, and laid out basically a program that it's not identical now. Like what happens today is identical to this, but this is the basic mechanism by which public opinion is molded, right? So whether it's for automobiles or whether it's for fashion or like the other opinions of political opinions and all that other stuff, the way he describes it here is just, it's crazy. It's funny to me that when I first encountered this book was back in, I want to say the early 90s. I had watched this documentary called The Century of the Self. It's an Adam Curtis documentary. I think it's available online, or at least it used to be. Although because it's a BBC property, it might be like behind the paywall of the BBC player online now. But there was a website called topdocumentaryfilms.com, and that was where I saw it. And it's a 4-part series. Each part's an hour long, and it talked about Bernays and the entire way that like self-interest was marketed basically, and that tied into other things that were going on in my head at the time. But when you mentioned this, having seen like this book mentioned in that TikTok video, I was like, oh, let me grab that off the shelf and flip through it again. And he talks about how the public relations guy works with ad makers, researchers, creative directors, copywriters, art directors, photographers. And all of these people come together to create this picture that is then presented to you, right, as reality,
Right.
And interestingly enough, Bernays makes reference to an earlier work by this guy, Walter Lippmann, called Public Opinion. And that book was written in 1922. And both of them, both Lippmann and Bernays, Bernays more than Lippmann was trying to rehabilitate the word propaganda, because it used to just be a way of saying, okay, well, we're like the propagation of the faith. It comes out of like the Catholic.
Yeah, it kind of used to just mean a way to, I guess, it was
to communicate information
in a easily kind of digestible. And it was designed, I think, to influence, but it's just like with any tool, it could be good or bad.
Yeah. Well, it definitely was meant to influence, and that's certainly. How about that? Your phone?
I don't know what happened.
Well, that was interesting. There you go. Technology intrudes. Oh, wow. That shot my...
Yeah, well, I kind of... I have a little, like, just a chapter by chapter breakdown.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I figured... I don't know. We have this kind of free flowing, but maybe we do need a little organization.
Yeah.
Well, and it just kind of led me to basically, like, in the first chapter, he kind of talks about using propaganda. It's used to organize chaos in a way where it's like, he essentially talks about it's I forget exactly how he phrases it. Maybe I should have pulled some quotes. But basically, he's pretty much saying that society is too complex for us to understand it. You know, it's like there's... And it's even worse now than it was back in his day, because now it's like I could scroll through TikTok and in 5 minutes I could see whatever the crazy stuff that's happening in the Middle East. Somebody's getting beat up by a cop over in wherever. There's a mass shooting over here. There's a blah. You know, it's like there's all this. There's presidential elections going on. There's Congress people trying to get elected. It's just that there's so much information. So it's like he's kind of basically in the beginning saying it's almost like we need propaganda because we don't have the I would say bandwidth, you know, so it's like we need these people, these public relations guys to kind of like distill stuff down.
Over in the existential risk category, groups of people that are looking at existential risk for the planet right now, they talk about the complexity of the world. Right. And that's what Bernays talks about. And it's also what Lippmann talks about, that the world is very complex. And if you, Mark, tried to understand everything about how the world operates in order to make a decision, you would never get out your front door.
Right. You can't, like, because
it's just impossible.
And he kind of gets into various examples. It's like even just buying toothpaste. I mean, I don't have time to go to the store and look at the box of every single toothpaste and see what's the ingredients, what's the blah, blah, blah. I saw a commercial for Crest or Colgate or whatever, and I just was like, oh, that, and I get to the store and it's familiar to me, so I just grab it, you know, because 5 out of 10 dentists or 4 out of 5 dentists recommended. And
that's part of the propaganda. Yeah. It's like, because, and this gets into the influencer economy, because a lot of what he talks about in this book is, in fact, the public relations guy figuring out who are the influencers, who are the people that Mark is going to listen to.
Right.
Right. So if I know that my average person really trusts like the medical establishment, then if I can get 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Crest.
Yeah.
Right. There you go. Now I've set up this propaganda basically because now Joe Blow is looking through the newspaper, and again, and when he wrote the book, you know, the main avenues of communication to the masses were newspapers, magazines, and radio.
Right.
I think television. I'm not sure if he might have mentioned like TV as being on the horizon of something that was coming. And it was certainly by the time that he retired. He had learned how to use it.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. All right. Was there anything else in that chapter that you wanted to touch on?
No, it kind of like, it just talks about like, I mean, the invisible government. And I think once again, I don't have the quote, but he said something along the line of most people don't realize it's really like 12 guys in some room that are deciding the presidential candidate.
Well, that was one of the things that I thought was interesting because he said in that chapter that because of the complexity of the like the political and all of that, that people had agreed to let the party machines choose the candidates. And that was true in the 1920s.
Yeah.
But you fast forward, like, I forget when, like 30, 40 years later, when the party machines were like shredded.
Yeah.
And that all went away, that the backroom deals, the smoke filled, you know, the guys smoking cigars you know, in the back room, choosing which candidates were going to be put forward is no longer a thing. But at the time when he wrote the book, that was how, because he says here, if all men had to study for themselves the abstruse economic, political, and ethical data involved in every question, they would find it impossible to come to a conclusion.
Right.
Right. And so based on that belief, right, they talk about this invisible government, we need these people, this small elite group of people, to make sense of all this stuff and to present the information to us in an easily digestible format so that we can make decisions.
Yeah.
And that's essentially the entire apparatus of public relations.
Yeah. What else? I guess we can get into chapter 2. I mean, because that's pretty much why it's like, all right, society's complex, so we need these. Here's a quote. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Basically, we need to, because of what he also said was that, it's too much. This one's kind of funny considering the book is 100 years ago, and it's so it's even new. So the new propaganda, modern propaganda, is more sophisticated than crude wartime posters.
Yeah, well, see, that was the whole thing about like why propaganda ended up with like the pejorative. Because after World War I, it became really apparent to everybody how much propaganda they had swallowed from the American, like the Allies, like the United States, how much like the UK and the US propaganda about what was happening over there turned out to be lies. But it was also that they were saying a bunch of stuff that was not true as well. So that it was like the after effect of that, like people becoming aware of what had happened during World War I, that created this like backlash against propaganda, which Bernays was trying to rehabilitate.
Right. Yeah.
This entire book is him attempting to reclaim the sort of the lofty, role for propaganda in a society. And he spent his entire life. He never recanted that he did not think that he thought that what the public relations were doing was good and noble.
Right.
Now we might, given the environment that we now live in with all of these conflicting stories and everything, we may question that, but that we live in that where there are experts, telling us whether it's, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this, or whether it's the untold number of ads for drugs. Ask your doctor about Abilify.
Right. Yeah.
Like, no, but that's all what he laid out here.
Yeah.
So did you want to move into chapter 2, the new propaganda?
Yeah, sure. Basically it's just like the new propaganda, and this kind of, I guess, bleeds into the next chapter after that, which is it's not like the newspaper guys anymore. It's still like, actors and other famous people, but now in this social media age, now it's influencers. people who have a big social media following and so they're selling. I think I said this before we started. It's like they're selling an image now versus, I mean, and I touched on it a second ago with the car stuff, is like you're selling this is cool, you need this. And actually that's not what it's, you want to buy this because you want to be that. Like, I think that's, sorry. Sometimes my mouth works faster than my brain. And basically what I wanted to say was essentially that they've shifted from here, sell to we're just going to make we're going to make it to where you're thinking that you're making the decision, that you're buying it. Mm-hmm. Like that. I think there was the example, I forget what chapter it was in, but the example of the you want to sell pianos. Instead of trying to sell pianos, you start making houses with a music room in it. So then it's like, well, now I need a piano because I need to put a piano in my music room. Like, so instead of selling it, like, no, I want to buy a piano, which in my sales training is, I mean, I'm sure a lot of my sales training, is derived from this, because that's what when we talk about selling, it's like you want to sell like the idea of what it's going to give you, how it's going to benefit you and make the person want to buy it versus they're feeling like they're being sold.
Right. Yeah, I think it comes later in the book.
I think it was later,
but in the new propaganda, one of the things he says, he goes, propaganda is the executive arm of the invisible government.
Yeah.
Right? And then he goes on to say about why the invisible government is needed. Again, this is from his perspective, right? He's going, well, here's why this invisible government is needed, right? We thought that universal literacy, right? Like compulsory education, getting everyone educated would be enough that they would be able to make decisions. He writes, but instead of a mind, universal literacy has given him rubber stamps inked with advertising slogans, with editorials, with published scientific data, with the trivialities of the tabloids and the platitudes of history, but quite innocent of original thought.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So he's saying that what this, compulsory education and what it's done is it's given everybody this ability to go, oh, I like what that guy said, but without actually really thinking it through. So you can, the elitism, there's a certain arrogance, intellectual arrogance here that the common man, right, is common in the sense that he rubber stamps things. He doesn't think it through. So if you're going to rubber stamp things, we, the invisible government, are going to present you with options that if you rubber stamp any one of them, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Right? You won't screw up the overall system. We'll keep all the options that could really screw things up away from you, so you don't even have a choice.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of the other book that I think we've mentioned was Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, because like the rubber stamping thing is the mode one of thinking. Or
system one.
System one, sorry, mode system. Yeah. System one thinking. And that's what I think, that's really what the propaganda itself is tapping into. It's tapping into that system one. It's giving you something that makes sense to you immediately. Oh, yeah, like make America great again. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I don't think it does, but whatever. But I get that, it's a simple, oh yeah, boom. Right. It's easy to digest, and I can just rubber stamp it using my system one thinking, and system two doesn't even have to get involved at all.
Well, one of the things that became apparent to me, was that again, the book was written in 1928, and the state of psychology and everything else was where it was, and they were making these determinations of how easily the public could be manipulated, right? And in the intervening 100 years, a lot of research has been done, and on cognitive biases and the system 1, system 2, the quick
instinct, if you will,
or the rule of thumb, that short term it works,
most of the time,
and versus the system 2, which is the more deliberative, looking at all the as much of the landscape as you're aware of, and all of that, and how much of the public relations industry has used all of those findings from psychology and economics to short circuit our, rational long-term thinking in favor of this short-term react right now, spend your money now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew. So it doesn't really surprise me that.
Well, and a lot of in that documentary, The Century of the Self, he made quite a bit of that that Bernays did talk to his uncle, right? And so that when you're having those kinds of conversations, you're obviously, building on that and saying, well, that's interesting. I wonder if that would work over here. And then he went out and tried it and said, oddly enough, it does work.
Yeah.
I wish I could find that thing on the. He says that propaganda becomes vicious and reprehensible only when its authors consciously and deliberately disseminate what they know to be lies. So he had a high ethical standard.
So yeah,
for himself, as far as he did not believe that what he was doing was in any sense manipulative, that was bad. He believed that him and other people that were involved in that they were really trying to make a better society.
Yeah.
Now whether they did or not is an open question.
Well, yeah, because I'm pretty sure, I don't know, the introduction chapter where the other guy's like talking.
Oh, Mark Crispin Miller?
Yeah, that part where he mentions about the cigarette thing. Like, I guess he initially super pushed cigarettes, and then once he realized that they were, detrimental to people's health, he, reversed his position. So it wasn't like he was like I guess I'm just piggybacking. It wasn't like he wasn't a terrible human, like I'm evil and I'm just out to hurt everybody.
Well, he was very instrumental, I think, in Philip Morris selling Lucky Strikes. He was like really good at that. But although Miller does note the fact that he did change his position and he became very much towards the end of his life anti-smoking, but there was that period of time when information was coming out that he was ignoring.
Yeah.
It was only when it became
glaringly
too big to ignore that the mountain of evidence had gotten large enough to where this then he changed his position. So good on him, but let's not give him don't give him too much. But it does show that he did have an ethical center, right, that you can ignore something for a while until I can't anymore.
Right, because sometimes, I mean, there's always, it's one of the reasons why, anecdotal evidence or what is not always, because it's like, there might be a small portion that something happens to. So, I mean, I suppose, whatever. We're not here to debate whether.
No, I just think that for like where I'm at in trying to make sense of the world and what I'm going to do over the time that I have left, it's just like being aware of the environment that I live in, right? Like what kind of information's coming to me and what purpose it has.
Yeah.
So that way, when you see something on TikTok or when you see something on Instagram or in the newspaper or in a magazine or whatever, you have a kind of a sense of that, all right, somebody's building a picture and they've got a story that they want to tell.
Yeah.
Right. He says here we were talking about influencers, right? The influencer economy. And he notes that anyone with sufficient influence can lead sections of the public, at least for a time and for a given purpose. And I put in the margin just dollar signs. Like if you've got money, you can get out there and get your message out. And the more money you have, the more avenues become available to get that message out. But he goes on to say that they not only appealed to the individual by means of every approach, visual, graphic, and auditory. So basically, your newspaper, magazines, and radio to support a national endeavor, but they also secured the cooperation of the key men. And here again, you can tell when it was written, in every group, persons whose mere word carried authority to hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers.
Yeah.
And so the public relations guy or gal now is watching the influencer economy. Who's got the most followers? Who's getting the most responses? And they're now targeting, like if they've got somebody who wants to get a message out, the public relations person is going, oh, okay, well, we need to get, say if Mark was an influencer, we need to get Mark on board with this because he's got like 2.7 million followers, or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that, anything else in that chapter? Or you want to move on?
I guess we could move on.
How are we doing time-wise?
Probably say another 10 minutes or so.
All right. Well, we're trying to keep our things to like an hour.
Hour-ish, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
I don't want to. I just I'm mostly doing that just because of my own preference. Because like the podcasts that I personally listen to are generally like around an hour. That seems to be a long enough attention span for me to keep, because some of these other ones that are like 2 hours, 3 hours, I'm like,
yeah, I had that. I was telling you about that one conversation that I watched between the existential risk guys. And it's like a 3.5 hour conversation. And I actually had to split it up. I had to watch half of it and then think about that and then go back and watch the second half.
Yeah.
Because that's too much. But anyway, so what else you got?
Yeah. I guess, we kind of touched on this. Once again, due to the nature of our nonlinear conversations, I feel like we've touched on a lot of the book. But the psychology of public relations, the humans are more driven by emotion than facts. And I think we kind of touched on that with the car thing. It's like, I bought a WRX, right? Now we talked to Subaru safety, but that car is not selling safety. That car is selling speed and exhilaration, adrenaline, whatever. Right. It's a fun car, and so basically like propaganda. The part of the purpose of it is to tap into some deeper desire or fear or whatever.
You're trying to get someone to buy your story, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that story is, so the official definition of propaganda that they try to rehabilitate, in that it's information. Right? It's information that you need in order to come to a decision about this topic. And because of the way that it was misused, right, it And during the 1930s, this book was written in 28, and most of the what was written during the 1930s and that about propaganda was negative, was how bad it was. So that's why, it has the pejorative sense today. You can't get around it. You can never say today in 2025 that here's propaganda, and people are going to go, get that shit out of here.
Well, and yeah, because of, what was happening, it's almost like that word, propaganda, I guess it gets paired with that term Nazi, speaking of the 1930s. Well, it's almost like a lot of times, and maybe it's just because of the current political climate that I've been hearing it a lot more, but it just feels like those two words are paired together a lot. So making the definition of propaganda more negative, because it's like you're pairing it with
something that is clearly
bad, right?
Right. And but also that's part of how this actually works, right? Because you'll say that, okay, now I'm going to take propaganda, I'm going to use the word, and now every time I use the word propaganda, I'm going to use it with references to National Socialism, right?
Yeah.
In the 1930s. And so suddenly now that connection may or may not be true, accurate, or anything else, but you make it often enough through the channels that he's described. And what happens? Suddenly a mass of people move.
Yeah.
And this is what Lippmann talked about in his book, Public Opinion. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that Bernays picked up on, although he didn't say it outright, was what Lippmann talked about was that what we respond to most of the time is what he called a pseudo environment. So there's what happens in the world, and then there's our interpretation in our head about what happened out there, and what we actually respond to is our interpretation.
Oh, yeah.
And so by making a picture and putting it in your head, I can get you to respond to that picture instead of what's actually happening. And now you look out in the world today, and whether you're trying to figure out what's going on in geopolitically or locally in the politics, you're having to sort through, all right, well, here's the information that's coming to me. Where is it coming from? And what's the story at the end?
Yeah.
Right. And then that way you can, at least it seems possible to be able to separate what's useful to really make a decision versus what's the noise that we talk about that, I get all confused on.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I react, like when the AI thing, like when I first realized what was happening to me, and I got all super excited, and then I was like, oh, and then I had to back off a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Because again, filtering the stories that I'm seeing, like when I'm reading the news, and then being able to like, okay, hold on. What are the powers? What are the what's happening here? And then it's, okay, now I can calm down a little bit. Yeah, there's some stuff that we need to be concerned about on the AI side of the thing. And I hope we'll get back to that at some point, because that's a real that actually is very interesting. Like what people are starting to say now, Like I raised that alarm a couple of weeks ago, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And in the couple of weeks since then, as I've been reading the news and following like AI news, the stuff that I discovered in like 4 to 6 weeks of working with it, suddenly there's all these news stories and people are discovering it now after a year and a half. And I think maybe I was just ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
That's just, ow. Did you hear that crack of me patting myself on the back? But yeah, so this is like one of those things that I don't know if I would recommend that people would go and grab this book and read it.
Yeah.
You know, because you live in the world that he describes.
Right.
You know, and so, yeah, as a historical artifact, it's interesting, you know, because he, you know, and the funny part is Miller talked about it in the introduction, like how the later chapters on education and those were all like afterthoughts.
Yeah.
His main purpose was to sell himself to businesses for them to make money, you know, to drive the capitalist engine, essentially. You know, I shared with you before we started recording a couple of those quotes, you know, as far as the factory owner needs the public relations guy because, hey, I got this factory, it's producing stuff and somebody's got to buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I would really wish I could find that thing on the music room. Because I know I've seen it.
Yeah, no, I can't remember what chapter it was.
Yeah, it's right here. Oh, well, that was a fun one. An example of this is the nationwide competition for sculpture and ivory soap, open to school children in certain age groups as well as professional sculptors. Right? The Procter & Gamble company offered a series of prizes for the best sculpture in white soap. Right? And all of that was to sell more soap.
Right.
That was it. So you have this entire art thing where the Metropolitan Museum of Art just displaying all these sculptures that people did out of soap. And the entire purpose of it was to sell more soap.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's about, I guess, I don't know. I guess we can end it here. We're a little over an hour and I'm not sure how much rambling we did in the beginning that I'm going to cut off.
Well, Mark, we ramble all
a
the
lot.
time.
Yeah, I know.
But anyway,
yeah, I guess, I don't know. How should we just wrap this up? Because we didn't really finish the book. We kind of just, well, I guess we discussed the main themes, but you know, here, how about this? I'll just, I had a few modern parallels, you know.
All right. Hit me with a modern parallel there, Junior.
As far as like the psychology, aspect of propaganda, it's like using social movements using emotional imagery, you know, pride flags, kneeling NFL players, you know, things like that. That's, you know, to trigger identification, I guess, or, you know.
All right. So that's one of the things that he talked about. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Oh, here's one that's probably near and dear to your heart about kind of the what we touched on about not just selling the product, selling like an idea but Starbucks. You know, Starbucks is not just coffee. It's kind of become just coffee, but when they first came out, it was a place to go. They had comfortable couches, they had chairs and tables, and people would go there and do work or do school assignments or just hang out and chit chat. You know, it wasn't just selling coffee, it was selling a place to hang out, basically, or, you know. what else? You know, I mean, Nike, you know, selling, you know, Jordan as like, oh, you be the best basketball player. You buy
Well, be
Jordan.
like Mike.
Be like Mike was the slogan. Yeah, yeah. Actually, that was Gatorade. Well, whatever. It all sold.
Was that Gatorade?
The commercial "Be Like Mike" was the Gatorade. It wasn't Nike, but I'm sure that
Nike was always Just Do It.
But I'm sure Nike or that helped sell more Jordan sneakers. Yeah, as far as political stuff, I already touched on it. There was the "Make America Great Again" was this simple, catchy slogan that people could identify with.
Yeah, they grabbed onto it.
You know, because they felt that this country is something's wrong with it.
Well, most everybody, I think about a year, it was actually right after the therapeutic disaster.
Yeah.
And I was asking people, you know, just that I was, you know, true or false, there's something wrong with the world. And everybody said true. And then I would go, okay, well, what is it? And then I would get a bunch of different answers. But most everyone does feel that there's something wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you said that when like something like "Make America Great Again" comes along, oh yeah, it's not as great as it used to be. You know, and they latch onto it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is about that whole, like, I think a lot of that it's not as good as it used to be is it's nostalgia for a time that you don't really remember that well, but you look through it through rose-colored glasses or whatever. It's like you looking at because the only reason why I say that is because you could go back to like the 1800s and the older people always say the younger people are lazy. The generation is lazy. They're lazy. They're lazy. They're lazy. They're lazy. I don't believe that the older generation worked harder than the younger in any of these circumstances. It's just you're thinking that something was better back in the days, but it wasn't. So the point is that's a common feeling with people. So saying "Make America Great Again" is easy for them to latch onto because they think about when they were a teenager and how much better life was.
Well, I think that's probably true for all of us. I don't know. Like
that's
you're 44 now, and
that's what I mean.
You go back.
True for all of us.
So you do go back. When I was 16, life was better.
I would like in my mind, I could probably say, yeah, the 90s were the best time ever. But somebody who was 50 in the 90s or 40 is going to look back to the 70s and be like, oh, we were having so much fun and it was blah, blah, blah. And then they're always going to look back to their young.
When I think the point that you're getting at is that all of us, when we were younger, life was better than it is now. And it's that life was better when we were younger, whether it was because we had less responsibilities or whatever it was. Life was simpler when we were younger. Therefore, everything about when we were younger had to be better. And maybe that's not true, but you can use it to say, well, that's a fairly easy bridge to understand why a simple statement like "Make America Great Again" just fits. It was better. I felt better. My friends said it was better. We all felt it was better. So yeah, let's rock. And again, like he says in this book, and Lippmann also says it, is that it allows you to rubber stamp something without having to really like throw your mind at it.
Right. And it's like when, people say, well, what, historians who look back at the history of the country, I guess I'll just say this and we can wrap this up because,
we've started to wrap up like 5 times already.
Yeah, no worries. But basically, whatever. Let's just wrap it up because I completely forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah. Anyways, this has been another episode of Occasionally Philosophical, where we tried to talk about the book Propaganda. If you want to read it, great. If not, you're not missing much. You live in a world was not created, but in some ways molded, I suppose, by the book.
I would argue. No, I wouldn't argue. That's not what I want to say at all. As I mentioned,
actually, maybe you should read it just so your eyes are open to what's happening in case they're not open.
On one hand, I mean, we are not a reading population much anymore. If you can get a hold of that documentary, Century of the Self. One of the things that we talked about last time, and we'll wrap it up here, is that here we are in 2025, and the world is just like, it's nuts. It's just crazy everywhere. And so much of what I see when I try to go out and make sense of it are thousands of explanations of why things are the way they are. And, we started our podcast with Ishmael, and one of the things that we didn't touch on, I don't think, is his definition of mythology, which is that it's the story that explains how things are the way they are and how they got to be this way. And this is one of the possible explanations for why we can't seem to get out of, like our own way, because there's everybody and their brother is using some version of this to get their story out. They're collecting their influencers. They're getting their ads on TV and the things in the newspapers and certain stories written, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to build this picture. And you and I are sitting here trying to sort it all out.
Yeah. Well.
And we're not figuring it out today.
No, never. Probably.
All right.
I'm
Doug.
And I'm Mark.
And this has been Occasionally Philosophical.